Hello everyone, my name is Alex. I'm a 2000 rated over-the-board chess player, and in this series we're going from 1500 to 2000 elo in chess.com rapid games, where I'll be explaining my thought process as best as I possibly can for your education and entertainment. Today we're playing the Caro Kann, and I don't think I've ever seen this move in my life. Pawn to e5 on move 2. Which is interesting because, I mean, technically we can't immediately attack this pawn because we have no knight to c6. We could also play d5 and try to transpose into an advanced Caro Kann, which is an option. But I'm kind of just thinking that we can go d6 and immediately challenge the pawn. And if takes, that's got to be good. So, yeah, this is a Caro Kann line that I've never seen before. But I feel like it can only be good for us because, I mean, e5 has to be an overextension, right? Like, there's a reason that we've never seen this move. I mean, maybe some of you guys have, but I certainly haven't. And it certainly hasn't been on the channel before. And I have hundreds of videos on the channel, with a fair few of those being in the Caro Kann. So, yeah, if taking with the pawn, I don't see the point, really, because to me, it makes more sense to develop the queen. And typically developing the queen early is a bad idea because the queen can be kicked around. But what you might notice is that if we get this trade, which we do, then we kind of have like a check perk. No, not a check perk, a Philidor sort of structure. If we get in the move e5, which we could play, but my opponent goes d4, which kind of prevents that. But also, my queen is actually very safe because the knights can't attack the queen immediately, of course, because knights don't move that far in one go. And the bishop can't come to f4 with tempo on the queen. And even if it does, it will take a move like knight to e2 to prepare that, which, why would you put the knight on e2? So I suppose we can just keep, like, well, essentially play a normal sort of position with a better development, because, of course, my opponent essentially spent his first 3 moves just moving a pawn, allowing us to develop a piece, open up our bishop, and we also have this c6 pawn, which monitors some important squares, right? We could try to play for the move e5, but I don't really like e5 take queen e2. I don't want to trade queens this early. I don't see the point. So I think what we'll do is we'll start with bishop to f5. Knight c3 is a slightly suspicious move as well, because knight c3 means that c3 can't be played defending d4, and c4 can't be played to kind of keep the pawns together so they can advance together in the center, which means that the d4 pawn could be a bit of a target. Now, we can't necessarily go for it immediately, because I mean, we can't put a knight on c6 to attack it, because to do that, we'd have to play c5, which not only weakens b5, but also would allow the pawn to trade itself off. But in the future, it could be a weak pawn, because c3 can't be played, right? So my opponent plays h3, which, okay, I mean, g4 isn't particularly scary, I don't think. So we could play e6 and just prepare to castle. Well, bishop e7 castles. There is an argument to be made for fianchettoing the bishop to lock on to the d4 square, but I'd like to keep g6 as an option to retreat my bishop, especially if g4 is played. Because if, like, g6, g4, I've got to retreat my bishop to a square like e6, and then it can be vulnerable to, like, a knight coming to g5, for example, which I don't want to do. So we could be more flexible with the move knight bd7, which I like the look of. And also, it's important to note, because the knight is on c3, and there's of course no e-pawn to defend the d-pawn, this d-pawn, while the knight is blocking the pawn c3 move, is kind of like an isolated pawn. And the way you tend to deal with isolated pawns is to stop them from advancing by controlling the square in front of them, which of course we're doing with 3 different pieces. So a move like knight b6, for example, makes a lot of sense to just really overprotect this d5 pawn, stop this d4 pawn from advancing, and then maybe at the right moment we can strike with e5 or something along those lines to break open the center. Also, castling queenside looks very, very tempting here, particularly considering that white is kind of far behind in development. He's got 2 pieces out. He's wasted a ton of pawn moves with e4, e5 take, and he's also played the move h3, which, I mean, was completely unnecessary, realistically. We could go e6, bishop e7, but I think I prefer queenside castle, because obviously we're not threatening to win the pawn just yet. It's defended twice anyway. But aligning the rook with the queen can't be a bad idea. That just, of course, is a good idea. And I think we're maybe trying to play e5 straight away. Because if something like take, queen d6, knight f3 check, take and take, we've ruined the white pawn structure. And actually, no, bishop takes d6. And we have insanely fast development. We could go e5 again. If take, if queen takes queen, we start with knight takes f3. If e5 take, knight takes queen takes, then the rook opens up on the queen. So we take on e5 with tempo, and that looks really strong. Now, I suppose the counter-argument is that if d takes e5 happens, then the bishop opens up on a7, which is obviously a weak pawn. So let's say e5 take, queen d6, knight f3, g f3, bishop d6, then potentially bishop a7 is a move. We could sacrifice the pawn and just play rook h to e8 check, bishop to e2. I suppose c2 would hang in those lines anyway. So I think I like that. And basically, by playing knight bd7 and queenside castle before playing e6 and developing this bishop, we kind of prepare the move e5 in one go, rather than going e6 and then e5, because e5 should be the clear pawn break in the position, especially because, again, we are so far ahead in development compared to white, so opening the center against the white king is often going to be a good idea, not least because we already have discoveries against the queen ready to go, and knight takes f3 ideas to ruin the white structure. By the way, if you're enjoying the video so far, please drop a like and subscribe if you haven't already. I would really appreciate it, and I do really appreciate the support on the channel recently, so thank you all very, very much. Bishop c4 from my opponent. He ignores this because technically we're not actually threatening it right now, because it's defended 3 different times, and instead he attacks my f7 pawn, which is a decent idea. Decent idea. So, okay, we have a few options. We could play a move like knight d5, blocking this diagonal and attacking the dark squared bishop. So if a move like knight d5, cd5, that would come with tempo on the bishop, and maybe we're trying to go e4. We can't put a rook on e8 yet because the dark squared bishop is in the way, unfortunately. Alternatively, we could play knight to b6 with tempo on the bishop. Although that does allow de5 because our knight no longer protects the e5 square. So I think this is a decent move from white. We could just play an ultra-solid bishop to g6, just defending the f7 pawn and asking white what he's going to do next, which is probably castle. We could play the move e4, shoving the pawn further into the white territory, attacking the knight. I think knight h4 is the most natural move, getting out of the way and attacking our light square bishop. But there, I suppose we have bishop to e6, offering a trade of bishops, and this knight is just locked out of the game. Bishop e6, queen e6 looks very nice. There is pawn d5, but we actually control that enough times. So I think I like the look of the move e4. We will check this after the game. I'm just very aware of the fact that I don't want d5 to actually work, because I don't want white to be able to easily trade off this weak d4 pawn. I'm also aware that if this d pawn can advance successfully, then we could be going a pawn down with bishop takes a7 ideas. And now that we're not opening the e-file with takes, then there's no checks on the king. Okay, knight g5. Admittedly, I don't really know why I didn't consider this as a move, but it is a move to go after f7, which is actually quite annoying. I'm not really sure why I completely blanked on that. But it happens. It happens. So, alright. Clearly, he is attacking f7 twice, and we have 0 defenders on f7. So, the threat is to fork both our rooks and our queen. And I'm not sure what else we can do other than just drop the bishop back and lose a pawn. Which isn't great, but I don't know what the alternative is at this point. It'll be interesting to check the computer analysis of this position. Maybe taking just needs to be played. That might be the idea. But okay, the knight comes in. We could try a move like queen b4, attacking the bishop. But I think bishop takes or knight takes is still fine. I don't think we're actually threatening anything there. So I don't really see a better option than bishop here. We could go bishop e6. But even then, bishop takes, pawn takes, and knight f7 is devastating. So bishop g6 it is. If knight takes, we'll have to trade and lose a pawn. If bishop takes, that's a little bit trickier. Because, of course, we can't take. Because after knight takes, we get triple forked. So after bishop takes, we need to add a defender to the f7 square, so that after takes, there's no knight to f7, renewing the threat. So, bishop takes. We might just have to go queen to e7. And after bishop takes, h takes, at least we open up the h file and the f file. My issue, however, is this dark square bishop just can't get itself developed, which blocks my rook's ability to come to f8 or just get the bishop to d6 on a very nice diagonal. So this is a tricky position. This is a tricky position. Also worth noting, d5, not immediately, but just at any point with attacks on a7, can be met with the move c5, blocking the bishop, and then that also gives us the e5 square to put a knight on, which might be useful. But yeah, this is a really strange position, like a very atypical Caro Kann, and doesn't really resemble the Caro Kann all that much, to be fair, but yeah, we'll see how my opponent goes about this. I'm mostly concerned about bishop f7. That is my main concern. Because, again, I can't take because of this. And if bishop f7, the threat is take, knight f7. Essentially getting rid of my defender and freeing up the f7 square for the knight. And I've got to be honest, I don't actually see an alternative to to queen e7. To me, that looks like the only move, and it's also not a move I want to play. Not only does it block my bishop, but it also releases some of my control over d5. And as I said, I don't really want to allow d5. Although I suppose I do have the move c5, which avoids the trade on c6 and blocks the bishop's attack on a7. But a difficult position. My opponent is playing very well here, making my life difficult. Making my life very, very difficult. And yeah, I mean, in this position, I suppose I just don't know why I didn't consider knight g5. I only thought of knight h4, which, in retrospect, was a bit silly. I mean, I suppose I could even consider bishop e6 in this position, to be fair. Take, that's all very good. If bishop e6 here, then there's no knight g5, because of course your bishop hangs. If bishop e6, take, then knight g5, I should be okay. But yeah, he goes for this. I don't see anything other than this. I don't see an alternative. Maybe we have ideas of knight d5. Although, I mean, this doesn't... Well, I suppose maybe we're threatening to take the bishop and then take the knight. But trading pieces while down material? Is that really a good idea? Probably not. Probably not. That is not so concerning. Nah, that's fine. I'm not concerned about that move because I'm just going to boot the knight. And isn't the knight just trapped? The problem is the bishop is taking up the knight's other square, right? That's the whole issue. I was expecting here, and then the point is that I don't have the move h6 to kick the knight away. That's the whole point. That doesn't help though. Rook takes. I mean, rook takes I think I prefer, just because it makes d5 ideas not as good. And yeah, the knight is just completely stuck. Yeah, I mean, this is one of the things I've been recently thinking a lot about chess, is that previously I'd get trapped in the mindset of, damn, I've got a bad position out of the opening. Well, this just sucks, doesn't it? And recently I've been more and more thinking, well, why can't I just start trying to draw losing positions, or start trying to win drawing positions, or winning losing positions? I've been really in that mindset recently, and my chess has been improving massively as a result of it, like a never give up mindset. And even at the level of blitz that I play, that's a free knight, of course, which is like 2200 right now. I will get losing positions and like against other 2200s, and then just create counterplay and claw back somehow a win or a draw from positions I have no right winning or drawing. So really useful mindset for me personally. Okay, so queen takes g5. My opponent technically has 2 pawns for the bishop, so the game is not quite over, and I'm still struggling to complete my development. He also attacks my bishop, so I have to be a little bit careful here. So bishop f7 looks nice and easy. Getting my bishop out of harm's way. Also just looking at some useful squares. Again, monitoring this d5 push with many pieces. And also maybe bishop c4 will be useful. Maybe looking at a2 is useful if white goes queenside. Castling kingside would be very bold considering the open h file. He does go kingside. Yeah, okay. That is bold for sure. We could consider the move knight here. I think I prefer rook h5, though, kicking the queen. Defended by the knight, of course. Well, and the bishop. The reason I don't like the move knight d5, which obviously offers a queen trade, is because at the end of the line, my e-pawn could fall. Although, actually, no. I suppose knight here. If queen here, I'd have to take with the rook, defending the e4 pawn. Maybe my bishop struggles to develop, but okay. Yeah, okay, queen f4 is not concerning. Let's go queen to d6 and try and insist on a queen trade, because I'm not sure where the queen can actually go to avoid a queen trade. I was expecting queen to g3, because then if queen d6, there is bishop to f4, and this diagonal is actually relatively annoying for white to be controlling so nicely. Here, though, of course, there is no bishop to f4, because the queen is on f4, and I'm not really sure what else the queen can do other than trade herself off. And again, let me stress to you, I've talked about this in previous games on the speed run. This is a position where the computer will say, like, -3, black completely winning. And you'll look at that in the analysis, and you'll go, yeah, of course, -3. Black has an extra bishop for only 2 pawns. This is completely winning. It's not. It's not. I mean, it is winning, but many of you would find a way to mess this up. And that's not me insulting you. This is just the nature of chess. Like, just on a realistic basis, if I were playing the white side of this against you watching right now, depending on your rating, of course, but if, like, you're under 1500 or something, I'd probably say 50-50 chances as to who wins this game. Again, that's not me insulting you, but chess is a difficult game. Just because you're up a piece for 2 pawns does not mean that there is no counterplay in the position, and does not mean that you're not going to somehow blunder a piece, right? So, this is still very important. Okay, my opponent goes queen to g3. I think we should snap that immediately. And also, what we're doing by taking here is we're making white's extra pawns less felt, because there is a 3-on-1 on the king side right now. But because white has double g-pawns, it's not, like, the majority isn't all that impressive. It looks more like a 2-on-1. So the fact that I'm down 2 pawns for a piece doesn't feel like it's 2 pawns for a piece quite as much, if you guys understand what I'm saying. Okay, so obviously the f-file, we have a lot of pieces on the f-file, and the white rook is also on the f-file. So I think I'd like to evacuate the f-file, essentially, and get my pieces off of the f-file. Something like this and this looks pretty nice. I think I'll start with bishop d6, because this looks like the most active diagonal for white to put his bishop on, so I should take over that. And also just hit the g3 pawn while I'm at it. I'm expecting the move pawn to g4, in which case I'll just drop my rook back to h8, because monitoring the back rank is obviously a good idea. And also, by inducing this, you could already imagine a world where our bishop comes to g3 and suffocates the king's movement, potentially forcing a trade of bishops, for example, which should benefit us because we are, of course, up material. Also, don't worry about the move g5, kicking the knight away, because after the knight moves, the bishop is defended by the rook, so that is not a problem. Although, I suppose something like this would be met with knight takes e4, so if g5, knight d5 hits both of these pieces, of course g5, knight here, take is very good for us, or bishop takes, because we trade more pieces. The interesting line, I think, is g5, knight d5, knight takes e4. Because if knight takes e3, then knight takes d6 with check. The point is the rook is overloaded. Rook takes d6, rook takes f7. And that looks like an interesting position. Although, I think the d-pawn just hangs, and then c-pawn hangs. But maybe g7 falls, and then the passed pawns are better. But, yeah, like I said, there is still play in the position. But okay. Bishop to g5, going after my knight. Interesting. I think I like the look of bishop back to e7. Which looks passive, but how else am I defending this knight? If knight here, then the e-pawn falls, and I don't have knight takes e3, because the bishop has moved. So I think bishop back to e7, which also opens my rook onto the d4 pawn, which is useful. And maybe prepares bishop d5, just locking down the center of the board. There are potential ideas of knight takes e4, because if knight takes e4, the f-file opens and the bishop hangs. But it never really works, because this bishop is also under fire, and my rook is protected, so there's no pins. If, like, knight takes, you can't play bishop takes first, because rook takes, and then the bishop is defended. So, okay. Rook d1 defending, and I think just a very simple bishop d5. Very simple bishop d5. I want none of this business. I want none of this business. I want none of this business. This seems like the easiest way to format the pieces. e4 is very well protected. f6 is very well protected. There is no d5 coming in. It's been a constant theme all game of not allowing the move d5 with any kind of with any kind of real play for white. Okay, the bishop retreats back to e3. Okay, how are we going to go about this then? So g5 is the idea, but g5 gives me the h5 square, which I'd be very, very happy about. And to be honest, just makes the g5 pawn a target, if nothing else. So I'd be very happy to see that. We could play the move rook to f8, which I think I quite like, preparing some rook trades. The bishop in the center is fantastic because it just kills all the play. It kills all of white's play in the center. And now I can shift my focus onto the king side. Maybe double rooks up with something like bishop d6, rook d to f7. g5 is always met with knight to h5, so that's not a problem. So yeah, this looks all very, very, very good. We'll see how my opponent responds. I think that his play is dwindling significantly. I mean, like I say, g5 seems to be the logical continuation of the position, but after knight to h5, well, my opponent actually just resigns because we've killed all the play. It's -2. g5, for example, which is actually the computer's favorite move. Wait, why is knight h5 losing? What am I missing? Take, take. Oh, the knight gets trapped. No, not like that. Wait, what? Why is the knight trapped? Is it bishop here? Yeah. Why don't the other moves work? Oh, because then we'd protect it with bishop d6. Okay, I was wrong. There is still play in the position. So I suppose I have to play knight to e8. Yeah. Well, my opponent probably should have gone for that, because I might not have noticed. As I said, just because black is up 2 pawns doesn't mean the game is over. But let's jump into the game review and see what the computer has to say. So, 80.8% for my opponent, 80.2% for myself. So, not a particularly clean game, to be fair. We have to move e5, which is just so odd. And d6 is the best move, because white can't really play a move like d4 to defend the pawn, because after takes, not queen d1, but actually queen a5 check picks up the pawn. I mean, in fairness, even if queen a5 check didn't win the pawn, and we traded the queens like this is obviously just a good position for black. Equality on move 5 is pretty good. So ed6. Computer doesn't love queen d6. It prefers ed6, which is very interesting. And after d4, it wants d5, and kind of wants to play it like a Caro Kann, except I suppose we're a move ahead, because we've already got c6 in. So after a move like c3, I don't even know what this is like, but it's like the e-pawns are gone, and we've both played the Caro Kann, except I'm a move ahead. But anyway, queen d6, d4, knight f6. Computer does want the immediate e5. I wasn't thrilled with this position, though. Computer seems to like it, but I don't know. I didn't think this was particularly good, personally. Also, it's just less fun to trade the queens that early. So knight c3, bishop f5, h3, an odd move for sure. Knight bd7, knight f3, queenside castle. Not the best idea. Computer prefers the immediate e6, which I didn't understand because, okay, let's say this. Take, take. It just wants bishop e7 and go kingside. I thought this bishop was just terrible. But I suppose it wants to put the bishop on f6 to target d4. So instead of fianchettoing to target e4, it wants to do it this way, I think. The queenside castle is fine. Bishop e3. Okay, so e5 is the best move. And my whole idea was after de5, you can see the evaluation go in my favor. After knight takes e5, if knight takes e5, queen takes e5, we have a massive advantage. This queen is under attack. If the queen moves to c1, for example, bishop b4, and you can see all my pieces come alive. My rook's coming to e8, my knight might be going to d5. The game is almost over. If queen takes d6, then we don't take and lose our knight. We play, or take with the bishop, and then knight takes, bishop takes. Although that's still a good position. We actually take on f3 first with check. And after gf3 and bishop d6, or the computer actually prefers rook d6. Why? I thought bishop d6, bishop a7, rook he8 check, and we're going to pick up c4, and we're completely winning. Computer wants rook takes, and after this... Why is this better? Is it just wanting to come... No? And if take, take? I think the computer wants to prepare a quick double up by already lifting the rook to d6, but that seems so odd. Either way, that was my plan. My opponent, however, ignores me, and here bishop g6, which was my initial move, is one of the better moves. There's also queen b4 counterattacking, which I also mentioned, and we can just go ahead and take on b2 with a lot of pressure. I assumed bishop b3 would be played here, blocking this and protecting the bishop, which is the only good move. Bishop g6 is also a move. I think I didn't like the look of knight to h4 here, but the computer thinks this is quite good for black. I suppose this doesn't matter. Let's forget the queen hanging. After hg6, if bishop takes here, I know the queen is hanging, but we're going to ignore the fact the queen is hanging. I don't know. Like, queen e7, kick the bishop away. Obviously, yeah, this isn't even that good. I know the queen is hanging, but I'm not thinking about that. So that was my concern. I didn't want to take here and lose my f-pawn, but yeah, the computer finds a way around it. It also likes ed4. And after queen d4, let's say knight d4, which looks natural. Bishop g6, getting out of the way and defending. Queenside castle, bishop c5. I suppose this knight is a bit of a liability. But it's a very equal position. Completely open center. e4 is what I played, though, and I had thought knight h4, bishop e6 was really strong, which it is. And if take, this knight is completely offside, and it has no way back into the game. This is almost winning for black. For some reason, I did not consider knight g5, and bishop g6 is a terrible blunder. Queen b4 has to be played, which I did consider. After bishop f7, well, I thought white could go for this and this. But I suppose the knight's completely trapped. I think I missed the fact the queen guarded this square. And if bishop takes, then of course queen b2, knight a4, queen b5? Bishop back threatening this. And then this is met with knight e6, though. So the computer wants rook e8, and if knight f7, then rook g8, which looks terrifying. This doesn't work, though, because this is defended. And I suppose bishop e6 is the idea. It does look scary, though. Bishop g6 is what I played, and after bishop f7, I went queen e7, and I thought this was not game over, but unclear how I have any compensation for the lost pawn. I can't kick this knight away because I have no h6 and it's well defended. And this is just a miserable position for the black pieces. Fortunately, my opponent went bishop e6 and I just go h6 and we're completely winning. Bishop takes d7, rook d7, the knight has no way out. Take. Oh my god, he hung his queen. Dude, I literally missed a hanging queen. I actually can't excuse that. That's so bad. Oh, there's going to be so many of you screaming at me in the comments as well. That's quite funny. That's quite funny. Well, we're going to know who has stayed around until the analysis, because I, in fact, did see that, just not during the live game. So queen g5. Bishop f7, I thought is a solid move. Castles, rook h5, I mean, it's a relatively easy cleanup process, but in fairness, the game is not quite over. I mean, g5 here, I can just go ahead and play knight to h5. The computer comes up with this really cool rook h2 check, and after takes knight g4, the pawn is pinned and I win the bishop. And if king h1, knight g4 anyway. And if takes, bishop f4, discovered check, and I win the bishop. So that's kind of a nuts idea. And if bishop f4, we of course trade. And if bishop back to d2, then bishop g3. Yeah, that's definitely a way to go about it. Bishop g5, bishop e7 is the best move. Uncovering this, defending this. Rook a to d1, bishop d5, securing the position. Rook f8 is an inaccuracy because of g5. And here, we have to move the knight backwards. If we go forwards, as I said, we have a very tricky position after this. And our best move is actually bishop f7, giving up the knight for a pawn and trying to play this pawn down position. We do have the bishop pair, so it is playable, but a very tricky position. Probably the point is to try and go for this and go for an opposite color bishop position, but very, very tricky. Fortunately, my opponent did not play g5 because he, in fact, resigned in this position. So that could have been a very interesting ending to the game, but my opponent, of course, left it on a bit of a cliffhanger. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you want to see a bit of a more normal Caro Kann position, then check out the game up here. And if you want to see the previous episodes of the speedrun, check out the playlist down here. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in one of those videos.